I've been working on translating some hand knitting Aran textured stitches to loom and machine knitting. This movie is about machine knitting. I found today's stitch in the Harmony Guide to Aran Knitting, which is really quite a good book, though older. And it only has a number identifying it in the book, so I'm going to call it the over and under stitch. It rolls a little bit, but not much, and it looks very nice from both sides. It's not reversible in the sense that both sides look alike, but they're both good looking, which makes it good for scarves and blankets. This scarf is actually a loom knitted sample, but at the gauge that I'm getting, you could easily do it on the knitting machine too, so I'll give you the pattern for it at the end of the video. It gets very close to the same gauge that you would get in stockinette using the same yarn. I suggest that for the pattern knitting part of it, the over and under stitch, you use a multiple of 4 stitches plus 2. In this case, I used 14 pattern stitches. When I demonstrate in a moment, though, you will see me working on 16. That's so that the 2 edge stitches may be used in seaming or to attach a trim. The yarn needle is holding the edge column of stitches on one side. That one is going to stay on the main bed at all times. The others may move to and fro. Here I'm starting with the 2 outer stitches on the main bed, then the next 2 on the ribber, the following 2 on the main bed, and so on across. At the edges of the work, I began with the 2 stitches nearest the edge stitch on the front bed or ribber bed for the first 2 rows. Now they move to the main bed. I am just about out of goodness in my sponge bar, so you're going to see me have to wiggle because my needles aren't behaving quite as I'd like, but I think I can get by with this project and then address that issue. So we transfer everything to the main bed, including the stitches that are already there, and knit 2 rows. Now we transfer again some stitches to the ribber bed, but it's going to be the alternate set of stitches. Last time we began with number 2 and 3, counting from the left on the ribber. This time it's 4 and 5, alternating with the next 2 on the main bed, the following 2 on the ribber, and all the way across, always leaving the final stitch on the main bed, no matter what else is going on. This pattern is easy, but the one tricky thing is remembering where you are. After knitting the 2 plain rows where everything's on the main bed, you could forget. So I have a trick. This needle out all the way over here is not in the way of my knitting, and there it will stay until it's time to move stitches 2 and 3 to the ribber. As I begin to transfer, I'll push that one out of work and pull up a ribber needle to remind me that stitches 2 and 3 are on the ribber bed, and I find that the simplest way to keep track. So in brief, here is the pattern. 2 rows with everything on the main bed. I consulted my reminder and became aware that it was time to move stitches 2 and 3 to the ribber bed. Once I started, I changed my reminder needle, transferred pairs of stitches to the new configuration, knit 2 rows, transfer everything back to the main bed, knit 2 rows, consult my memory device, transfer again, knit 2 rows, transfer back to the main bed, and so on. If you are combining this with other stitches, it's important to be able to predict which side is going to align with those stitches. For example, on the cabled scarf. The side showing in the photos of both samples is the side produced by the main bed. So to make the cabled scarf, these 3 cable stitches would also need to be on the main bed, so the knit side of them showed. This is a light number 5 yarn, and as I mentioned, I made the actual sample scarf on a loom. But using the very same yarn on the knitting machine at maximum stitch size, I get the same gauge. If you want to set up your machine to knit this scarf, here's how to do it. These 4 stitches stay on the ribber at all times. These 6 stay on the main bed at all times, and you work a cable on them every 4th row. It's a 1/2 cable, with the single being lifted towards the outer edge of the work and moved towards the center first. Begin and end with knit 1, purl 1 rib, so that's 1 stitch on the main bed and 1 on the ribber alternating across. I worked 12 rows of it, then worked in the pattern stitch plus cables at each side for 127 rows. And then to stabilize the edges, I worked worm trim along each one of them, working into that single edge stitch, the one that stays on the main bed throughout. I preferred not to go all the way down the ribbing. I started just above it with my worm trim, but you could include the ribbing. If you would rather use number 4 yarn, I'd recommend using 28 stitches in total and setting up the edges in the same manner that I showed you, which will give you 18 working the over and under pattern.